Nationalism and cinema have both emerged relatively recently, appearing in the 19th century. When the cinema first emerged, many characterized it as a transnational medium because its original silent format meant that there was little to no language. The introduction of subtitles, followed by sound and speech, would change this interpretation. Although Benedict Anderson's influential work, Imagined Communities, argues that the invention of nationalism depended on the emergence of printing, the case of the cinema presents a different picture. Rather, the presence of written titles, or as Anderson calls it, print language, in film remained relatively free of nationalistic features. Ultimately, the introduction of recorded speech would eventually produce more nationalistic tones in cinema. Recent scholarly debate over the concept of national cinema often focuses on the construction of the nation in film and questions what elements of a movie constitute national representation. Questions include what makes a movie national? Is it the actors, the writers, language of the film, the country financing production, or is it the setting, music, decor, dress, or featured cultural elements? For our argument, we saw national cinema as a reflection of national qualities and values. For this project, we will focus specifically on English cinema and how a typical English image is produced and perpetuated through certain movies. We look at 4 major themes for this project: culture, landscape, medieval history, and lastly, royalhood and empire. The English have a long and distinguished cultural tradition, and there is a sizable body of cinema focusing on English literary tradition. Movies like Pride and Prejudice, Great Expectations, and Jane Eyre tend to emphasize a classical image of Victorian literature. Heroines are depicted as conservative, strong, and honorable, and romantic love wins out above socioeconomic barriers. Figures such as Mr. Darcy have become iconic representations of English values and norms, and various adaptations and reimaginings of such a character show the continuing influence of these figures on popular culture. The moderate English climate and landscape are often connected with the English temperament. The popular image of the English countryside, with idyllic green fields, has consistently been present in English culture, and has been immortalized in various mediums, including poetry and film. As mentioned previously in class, the image of the Shire in Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit depicts the classical countryside image, complete with a sense of tranquility and cohesive community. While the world around the Shire is engulfed in war and destruction, the Shire remains untouched by the corruption surrounding it. Downton Abbey also portrays a customarily English image of both natural and constructed landscape. It presents the English audience with a familiar and recognizable image of the country, which is no longer prevalent but still deeply tied to the national identity. Underneath the landscape of the Shire and the estate of Downton Abbey is a tone of nostalgia for an era long gone. This can also be seen in movies such as The Duchess, Jane Eyre, and Pride and Prejudice, which present their audience with a typical image of the countryside. It is also worth noting that several scenes of these 3 movies have been filmed at the same estate, Chatsworth. The prominence of Chatsworth Estate in these films have even transformed it into a popular tourist destination.
Knights, the gift of freedom is yours by right. But the home we seek resides not in some distant land. It's in us, and in our actions on this day. If this be our destiny, then so be it. But let history remember that as free men, we chose to make it so.
Although English knowledge of ancient times remains uncertain and incomplete, these medieval movies all center around heroic myth, and these myths center around the defense of old English predecessors against external threats. These are myths that illustrate the glorious birth of the English nation in ancient times. Furthermore, they help create a historical narrative which supports romantic nationalism and provides the nation-state with some sort of cultural and historical foundation. These myths have become part of the national consciousness, even though they may not technically portray English characters. As Arthur helps the native Britons fight off their Roman oppressors, and Robin Hood fights for the people against the corrupt elite, English values are being constructed. These narratives create some form of a common past through which certain values, such as bravery, morality, and strength of the ancient roots of the nations, are presented as embodied in the nation and take on a symbolic meaning.
Every Englishman's home is his castle. What we would ask, Your Majesty, is liberty. Liberty by law.
English history does not exclusively consist of royalty and empire, but it often seems that these are key ingredients of its perceived Englishness. History is often taught by learning these royal figures by heart. The debate about whether England needs a royal family has been going on for decades, but the success of recent movies such as The Queen and Elizabeth show that a royal family has historically played a crucial role in shaping the contemporary conception of England. The popularity of certain historical figures in films, such as Elizabeth I, Queen Victoria and Henry VIII, helps us understand what the nation values. These movies choose to highlight aspects of history considered representative of the nation and its former greatness, and periods of English triumph, domination, cultural development, and political strength are often the focus of such films. As we can see with the movie The King's Speech, the film focuses on the growth and success of King George VI, instead of the constitutional crisis and controversy surrounding the abdication of King Edward VIII. In The Young Victoria, Victoria is displayed as a ruler with a strong moral standard, who is devoted to her people, just like Elizabeth and Margaret Thatcher. These movies center around strong political figures of English assertiveness and prosperity. The typically English features we found represented in English cinema emphasize history, landscape, and royal institutions. These movies produce images now deeply ingrained in popular culture and are often fixated on a romanticized past. As we have tried to show you, English cinema contributes to the creation of a certain typical English narrative through which values and identities are being presented as national.